Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining in on time. Welcome to Fundraising Friday webinar. The main purpose of this series of webinar is to build a community of NGOs around fundraising for knowledge exchange, knowledge enhancement, and everything related to fundraising. And Danamojo is India's first payment solution platform specifically designed for NGOs. We are a community of 900 plus NGOs now. Recently, Danamojo released two platforms, one for recurring donations and other for QR code. To look into how Danamojo works, what are the services, what are the features, let's look into a video which introduces you to the features of Danamojo. Thanks for joining in. Welcome to Fundraising Friday webinar again. Today, we have a real life hero. He is an independent fundraising strategist. He has raised a massive 5 crores in a span of 6 months, that too during the COVID times. He is Rishabh Lalani. Rishabh Lalani is an independent fundraising strategist with nearly 11 years of experience in the for-profit and non-for-profit sector. In the past 7 years, he has consulted with family offices, corporate foundations, business incubators, and civil society groups to raise close to 6 million US dollars for philanthropic funding of variety of causes. Most recently, he volunteered to raise funds for 54 causes across India for COVID relief activities. He raised nearly 720,000 US dollars in a short span of 6 months. He holds a master degree from the Tata Institute of Social Science, Mumbai. Now, this session is going to be very, very interesting as he is going to share his experience of this massive fundraising, that too in difficult times. So, shall we make it more lively and more interactive by switching on the video? Please go ahead and switch on your videos if your network allows you to do so. Thank you very much. Before moving on to Rishabh's talk, I want to take 2 minutes to talk about a new initiative which Danamojo has started. It is called Dana Avas. It's a platform for you NGOs to raise your concerns and issues that you may face because of few acts and other rules that are prevailing. These are in the form of micro surveys, the surveys that may contain 1, 2, or 3 questions. To start with, we have put up the survey regarding FCRA Amendment Act that happened in 2020. And this is a survey that contains just 2 questions, which could give an idea of the issues that you may face in your daily operations. I am putting in the link of this survey in the chat. Please click on this link and it will open up in a new window. And please fill in this survey whenever the time permits. But make sure you attend this survey. Indian Development Review has agreed to take up an article on aggregate of this survey if we get the responses from 300 NGOs. Make use of this opportunity and express your views. I wouldn't take more time. Over to you, Rishabh.
Thank you, Namita and Dhaval and Danamojo for having me here. It's nice to see so many people out here. So I'm excited to share some of my experiences. So I've been fundraising now for 7-8 years in the nonprofit sector, and largely, I've been employed by someone to do fundraising. Now, what happens is that fundraising is a direct function of the network that one person has. And those networks take a lot of time to develop, especially because people don't know you, people don't know what you're coming for. Causes aren't as popular as, let's say, consumer brands, organizations, private organizations that can give their advertisement. So it takes a lot of time to build trust with people who you ask for money. And so I've been doing this for 7-8 years. And, when the pandemic hit, I think around 24th or 25th of March is when we went into lockdown last year. Um, I was sitting at home in Bangalore, and I was prepared for a 0 year, which means that I was prepared for a year where there would be no work, where there would be nothing that is happening. And while sitting at home and looking at the crisis unfold, I started getting calls from NGOs and some foundations that I knew. Especially, one of the NGOs that first called me said that they have migrants and slum dwellers who are stuck in Ahmedabad in a slum, and nobody knew what to do. And for some reason, I was also a bit lost. I mean, ideally, as a fundraiser, the first thought that should have come to me was that I should be raising money to help people, but it actually didn't. I was just sitting at home and trying to make sense of all that was unfolding around us. So when I got the first call, that was followed up by a call from a foundation which said they wanted to give money for relief to some NGOs, and if I could suggest some names. And as I started to see the situation unfold around me, I realized that a lot is happening and something needs to be done. Like I said, I was completely out of my depth. I had no clue what to do. So the first thing that I did actually was I went on social media and I started scrolling and seeing what others were doing. And incidentally, one of my friends on social media had made a massive donation to the West Bengal CM Relief Fund. And when I saw that, I knew what I had to do. And the first thing that I did was I broke an FD and I started making donations to the NGOs that I knew were doing good work. NGOs in Bangalore, NGOs in Gujarat, NGOs across India, and I started giving out my own sort of money to that. And as I started doing that, I realized that many people who had never given any money in their lives, had not made any donations in their lives, um, wanted to do something and wanted to sort of be a part of this whole uh, organic support that was building for migrant labor. Um, and so I put out a Facebook post, a public post, and I said, well, hey, I've donated this much money to these many NGOs, and I put out donation links for each of the NGOs and what they were doing. And surprisingly for me, many of my friends started donating to those links. And that, I think, was my first lesson. Had I not put in my own skin in the game, there was no way I could exhort other people to give, and I could ask other people to donate. And immediately after that, I realized that I need to put public information out there. I need to say it because people believed in what I was doing, and they believed in it because I was giving my own money. So there was a ring of authenticity, a certain sense of credibility to what I was doing, and people needed clear, concise, credible information to give money. Which means that if, as a nonprofit, we are asking for donations, the more concise and the more clear your ask is, the easier it is for someone to donate money to you. And usually people like to donate in 1 or 2 clicks. So if you have a payment gateway, if you have a payment link on your website, put it out there, put it on a public facing platform so that it's easy for people to donate. That was my second experience, or second sort of set of learnings that make it really easy for people to give. Um, Third thing that I started doing was that, over the last 8 years, I know I've got in touch with many people, um, but I'd never consolidated that set of informations, or that contact list, so to say. And I started putting names of everyone that I knew, everyone who I'd ever been in touch with, everyone who I thought could give money in one place. Whether it's their phone numbers, whether it's their email addresses, whether it's their social media profiles. I started putting all of that in one place, and before I knew it, I had a massive set of people who I could get in touch with. Um, and I started writing to each one of them based on wherever they were present. If I had their email address, I started writing an email to them. If I had their phone number, I sent a WhatsApp message to them. If I was connected with them on Facebook or LinkedIn, I started messaging them on those platforms. And surprisingly, many people started responding to each of the platforms where I reached out to these people. So having a list of people who you want to get in touch with, figuring out where they're, where you're connected to them and how you can reach them best was my third most important lesson during the pandemic. um, I also realized that people wanted consistency. People were looking for someone who was there throughout. So every 3 or 4 or 5 days, I would start, I would make a Facebook or a LinkedIn post, and I would keep people posted about what I was doing and what was happening. Very interestingly, on the third or fourth day of this, organic campaign that I was building on Facebook, a corporate foundation reached out to me, and they said that they wanted to give money to two of the NGOs that I was I'd mentioned in the list of organizations that I'd supported. And by the fourth day, apart from the 4 or 5 lakhs that was raised through individual donations, I had gotten 20 lakh rupees from one corporate foundation to two of the organizations that I was supporting. And that was also very, very fascinating, that just this public outreach, this whole public messaging that I was creating was not just reaching individuals, but it was also reaching larger institutions and getting them support, getting them the impetus to support organizations. So that was also very interesting. Um, and as that started happening, I got even more encouraged. So I started writing to corporate foundations on my own. And I started writing to rich individuals, high net worth individuals, ultra high net worth individuals, some of them who I had met, some of them who I'd never met in my lives. And I started drafting emails where I told them what the need was, but I also politely sort of let them know that if they don't respond to my emails, or if they are really tied up with whatever they're doing, I would understand. So I gave them an exit as part of my emails, because when people when such a crisis is unfolding, different people are going through different crises, right? I made it a point to ask them, as to how they were doing, if they were doing all right, because while others were suffering, even people with wealth were suffering. Sure, the extent of the suffering may not have been the same, the extent of chaos in their lives may not have been the same as that of a poor person, but showing that common humanity to everyone, and showing everyone that you cared for them and not just their money, was very, very important in building that relationship. And that's something that I did, I think, quite frequently, quite consistently. um, and as I started writing, some donors started responding, saying, we've donated to the crowdfunding campaign that you've mentioned, we've donated to some of the organizations that you've put in, can we do more? Right? And as people start asking, can we do more, um, most importantly, your response should be, yes, you can do more, and you should have enough for them to give to you. I mean, you should have enough bandwidth to accept the money that is coming your way. So I started looking at social media for other NGOs that were doing good work, other organizations that were doing good work, organizations that I didn't know. And I started sending it to donors who asked me if I could, help them give more money. So as an intermediary, my job was not just to kind of help them give to the causes that I knew about, but also to find new and other places where they could give money and feel satisfied that they'd done enough. So it worked both ways. Obviously, as a fundraising consultant, I charge for these things. But during COVID, I realized that, it's impossible that, one could take money out of things for medicines or food. So I didn't charge anything for any of these things. And that really sort of expanded the scale of my work, because when people realized that, and I didn't have to say this to anyone, I think it was very evident to people that here's a guy who's consistently coming back to us with more and more requests, with more and more things that he's doing, and he's in it, for the cause and not for what he's gaining out of it. And that really sort of upped the credibility space and the trust space quite a bit. The other thing that I also recognized was that while some foundations and some organizations were asking for proposals, um, writing a good proposal at that time wasn't as important as reaching the organization that was giving money at the right time. There were multiple instances where someone told me that X organization or Y foundation is giving money, and why don't you talk to them? And just because I reached them at the time when they were giving money, or that they were making decisions, kind of helped push through proposals quite fast. So, as someone who's approaching organizations, or as someone who's approaching people for money, I think it's critical to understand that you can write the best proposal, you can write the most well formulated program idea, but unless you reach someone, at the right time, in the right space, with the right sort of recommendation or connection, things are not going to work out. And once again, that is a function of the network that you've built over time. So it isn't that, all of this was something that I built during the pandemic. This was stuff that I had done over the last 7-8 years, which was now resulting in money, donations, goodwill, support, resources, at this very crucial time in all of our lives, right? um, and the fact that I was consistently sharing this on social media, that I was consistently updating everyone on emails, I was consistently putting this out everywhere, also ensured that the trust factor wasn't one time, but it was something that repeatedly was out there. So, trust is a factor of multiple repeat interactions, which means that, if you approach someone once and you tell them, hey, I want money, sure, that person's not going to give you money, but they're also going to be like, let's see, how much money does this person really need, or let's hear them out a little bit more. And you'll realize that unless you go to a person 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times, they will never understand if you're sincere or if you're worthy of trust. And people don't necessarily want to know the credibility of your program or the strength of your work. People want to understand you. They are giving money because you seem credible, or they're not giving money because you seem uncertain, right? So as the face of your organization, or as the face of your cause or your mission, people are essentially looking at you. Very few donors, if at all, will make the effort to deeply understand what you do, why you do it, how you do it, right? Even a few field visits can't help someone understand the complexity of a nonprofit organization's work, right? But people believe in what you are saying. People believe, who you are, or people don't believe who you are. So keeping that trust alive over a really long period of time requires you to put yourself out there on a daily basis, put yourself out there consistently, and follow up on what you said. And that really makes all the difference in this whole sort of environment. um, what the other thing that also kind of worked for me was what this constant sharing also did was it fed me a lot of information. That means that while I was helping get people money, people were also helping me by saying that, hey, you can talk to this person or that person or that organization, maybe you'll get something more. So, in some way, um, the relationships that I had developed, even though they were virtual relationships, even though they were relationships with people I had hardly ever met, uh, they turned out to be reciprocal relationships. So while people were seeing me help others, there were also people who were responding to me saying that, this is how we can help you, or this is who we can connect you with, or this is who you could speak to. That means that if you put your intent out there, and if you actually show the world that you're trying to do something, help will also come your way. And so just seeking doesn't necessarily result in support for what you're doing, but also giving is a very important part. And that's something that I feel like nonprofits could do a lot more of, right? Sharing openly, sharing critically, sharing things about what you're doing also helps other people help you. And that's very, very important. Many nonprofits think that just because they're doing great work, they don't need to go out and talk about, they don't need to go and talk about their work outside. Um, that's just not true. The fact that you're doing good work is good for you, and is a call, or a conscious decision that you've taken in your life. But unless you talk about it to the world, unless you make it a point to let the world know that you're doing something and the value it's adding to society, people will not understand it. And if people don't understand it, they will not become part of who you are. um, there were also several times during this whole campaign period or this whole fundraising period that many people said that what I was doing was pointless. Whatever I was doing was not important or was just a drop in the ocean. It wouldn't make a lot of dent. It wouldn't, make much of an impact. And it really bothered me that people were saying these things to me, one on one. And sometimes I would just get really tired with all of this negativity. And there were, sometimes a couple of days where I would do nothing, where I would stop writing emails or where I would stop making Facebook posts. Um, and then I kind of realized that, while different people have different opinions on what should be done or should not be done, the point is that you have to do what you feel is right in the moment. And if you feel that your cause is worthy of raising money, that's all that matters, right? So it's important to rest yourself. It's also important to, detoxify in some way. Let the negative energy out. Talk to someone. Have people who will listen to you and understand you. Sort of, be available for you, but get back at it again, right? Unless you're on your feet and you're back in the game, people won't know that you're doing this. And fundraising, like any other thing, luck does play a big role in the money that you get. And luck will only come to you when you're in the game, right? When you're in the field asking for money. If you're not around, if you're not asking for money, then there's no probability of luck happening for you or against you, right? You can get unlucky or lucky only once you're in the space. So it's important to be out there all the time. Um, the other thing that I also felt important is that, you know, while sharing is important, while talking about it is important, um, it's also important to keep communication, close the loop on all communication. So what happens is that when people give money, we take the money, we use it, and then we don't get back in touch with people who've given us money. There's very little investment in the whole sector on engagement with donors. So what happens is often after submitting, let's say, a utilization report, or after submitting, let's say, a closing report, people don't get back in touch with donors, or a lot of organizations just get on with life as usual, which is why a lot of donors end up being one-time donors, or give for a project and not for a program. And I saw great merit in closing the loop. So with every donor, from the point of telling them that, hey, I'm raising funds for COVID relief, to the point where I was telling them what I was doing on a frequent basis or periodic basis, overall made a whole world of a difference to how they looked at me. And that also ensured that they didn't feel like they were being instrumentalized. They were not just ATM machines, but they were people who were an integral part to this whole effort to try and do things. And they also felt helped, right? That here is someone who's genuinely trying to help us give money. Here is someone who's genuinely trying to help us understand the situation on the ground. And that really was transformative in the whole experience of this fundraising campaign. um, some of the newer people that I got in touch with, um, or some of the newer people who I'd never met, um, were also very open to making connections to foundations and to companies. And so one of the things that I constantly did was I constantly asked, right? So if you've gotten in touch with someone who's high profile, you've gotten in touch with someone who has the contacts and connections, but you don't, right? The only way you can get them to do something for you is to let them know that you're around and you're serious about what you're doing, and that you will be judicious about how you use those contacts. And that is again a function of multiple interactions. And what that did for me was it opened many doors. So apart from the 720,000 dollars or 5.5 crores that I raised for relief, I was also able to raise $2 million for programmatic funding for a large migrant resilience collective, during the pandemic from a major international foundation. And that was again because someone felt that I was worth connecting. Someone felt that, I could speak to senior leadership in a large foundation and, help them figure out where best to invest their money for this year, because people had programmatic funding, especially American foundations had a lot of money because the stock markets were an all-time high and their endowments had increased. And that was also very sort of helpful. Keeping a track of the stock markets was also something that was very helpful for me, because every time the market was on a high or things were improving, it meant that some people had disposable income to give, especially the wealthy and the ultra wealthy, right? Because a lot of their money is invested in the markets. So if you see that the market is going up, it's actually a sign that these people will actually have more to give than, let's say, on an ordinary day when the market is down. And that was an important proxy indicator that I used quite a bit. So I would write emails on days where I would feel that the market is going good or generally the sentiment is very high, and that would have all the kind of impact that was necessary. Uh, and finally, I want to say that I've been talking about what I've done over the last 1 year in as many forums as possible to as many people as possible. And what that has done is it has kind of expanded the whole sort of idea of what can be done, and people have tried new things. People have made an effort to sort of put themselves out there. And what I would encourage you to do is that if you've had experiences, if you've had things that you've done during the pandemic that have worked for you, please share them. Please talk about them. Please share them in the form of write-ups, in the forms of webinars, or Facebook or Instagram lives, so that the world knows what is happening. And only when the world knows what is happening is when you will get more and more input on what you can do. Um, that's largely been my set of experiences during the whole sort of last year. Um, I've also done a couple of crowdfunding campaigns during the year, apart from, let's say, putting my knowledge out there and putting my experiences out there. And both of those have also kind of been very interesting in seeing how people have been giving. Give India survey came out which said that individual giving has increased by 85%, and there's a larger sentiment within people to give. But you can only know this when you've actually put yourself out there. So in June there was a New York Times article that had come out about two friends, one of whom who died during the way back home, and how this friend of his helped his dead body get home, and how he helped finish the last rites of his friend. And that story went viral. A lot of people retweeted it. A lot of people posted about it, and a lot of people wanted to help this family and the boy, um, you know um, who had taken his dead friend's body back home. When I read that article, I wrote to the writer of the article in New York Times, and I asked him how I could help. And he asked me if I could run a crowdfunding campaign. And I actually ran a crowdfunding campaign based on that newspaper story. And what that did was that suddenly everyone who wanted to give started thronging on the crowdfunding page, and they started donating. And I used my emailing list. So I used Substack, and I have a huge number of email IDs that I put on that list, some 4,000 email addresses. So every time someone writes me an email, or I respond to an email, that email address gets added to Substack automatically. And what it does is it creates like a longish list of everyone I've interacted with. And I wrote on that emailing list the whole story of what happened to these two boys, how one of them took the family back home, and how this was an enduring sign of friendship between a Hindu and a Muslim. and it generated so much enthusiasm on social media, through my emails, that people started donating. And I think in under 10 days, we raised about 6.5 lakh rupees, and offline donations worth about 1,60,000 bucks, for out of just the nature of that newspaper report and the virality of that report. So sometimes it helps to see what is going viral, to see what is, let's say, um, what is something that people relate to, and doing something about it, because then that shows that you're serious not just about what you do, but serious about the state of things that is happening around you. And that's a game changer, in the way people look at you, in the way people understand you, in the way you understand yourself, not as someone who's just running their organization, but as someone who's interested in the well-being of everything, and or everyone around them. And that was very fascinating. I also did a birthday fundraiser, where I asked people to donate on my birthday, to one of the causes that I was supporting. And interestingly, in a week's time, I raised about a couple of lakhs, for that cause. And that was also, again, something that was new to me. I'd never done that before. But just because consistently I'd been putting out noises and causes that I was supporting, it kind of gave people the strength and the belief that if we give money through Rishabh, or what Rishabh is supporting, it'll go for something good, or it'll go for causes that mean something. So trust, credibility, communication, being there at the right time, at the right place, and closing the loops throughout, right? Sending your ATG certificates on time, sending a closure report on time, keeping people updated. These are very basic things. They may not sound like rocket science, and they're not rocket science. Uh, all of these things change the way, people look at you, change the way people perceive you, change the way your causes is looked at, your mission is looked at, and it adds so much more to what you're doing, and makes fundraising a lot more easier. One final thing that I'd like to say is that, when you write, and when you communicate, and when you're saying things to people, it's very, very important to know what they want to hear. So oftentimes we say things to people in the way we want to say it to them, or what we understand of what we're doing. But it's important to understand what the other side wants to hear. It's important to make sense of what is it that will most appeal to the audience that you are writing to. And unless you frame your communication, and unless you frame your narrative, so narrative is essentially the sequencing of events in your story, right? And that defines what your story is going to be like, right? That's going to change the way people perceive you, and you have to get your story right. There's a, this is an example that I read on Facebook, and it will forever resonate with me. Amir Khan did two movies in the last 10 years. One movie is Three Idiots, and the other is Dangal. When he did Three Idiots, the message of Three Idiots was that if you force your children, if you let your children be, and if you let them do what they want to do, they will do good in life, and they will succeed in life. And the result was that Three Idiots was a super hit movie. I think it was one of the few movies that crossed 500 crores in India. Dangal was a movie that said that if you force your dreams on your children, and if you push them to do what you want to do, then they will succeed in life. So it was the exact opposite of Three Idiots, and the result was that Dangal was a 2,000 crore movie. It was the highest grossing movie of all time. Succeeded in China, succeeded elsewhere. And for me, this was a fascinating observation by the author of this post, uh, that ultimately the content of your story doesn't matter. It is pointless. How you say it and how you present it is all that matters, right? And on that note, I'm going to stop. I'm sure, there are so many of you on this call, and you'd have a bunch of questions, and I'm happy to take them and engage with those questions.
That was very inspiring, Rishabh. I'm sure all our NGOs would be having a lot of questions now. I would request you all to raise your hand. You have an option to raise your hand also. I would unmute you. Also, if raising hand is not an option on your Zoom, you could switch on your video and raise your hand. I will unmute you. You could go ahead and ask your questions. Yes, Sampada, please go ahead.
Yeah, so since no one is asking, I'll take the opportunity to ask question to Rishabh.
Yes.
So it was a lovely session, Rishabh, and so I have my own company in other sector, as in I am a corporate filmmaker and doing my own business. But equally, I am working with Srujna, which is an NGO, and I'm raising funds for them, which is my passion to work for women and that complete sector. So my question to you is, whenever I am approaching my clients or people who are in corporates, particularly this year, I have heard your complete story, but still I am getting this responses that अच्छा ये साल में हम लोग ने इतने लोगों को निकाला है, ऐसा हुआ है, वैसा हुआ है, so we actually don't have funds and all that. So how to overcome that, or could you help me in that sector, as in how can I inspire them to uh, donate or help us on this?
So, the thing is that we don't need to inspire everyone. Uh, we need only the few who will support us. Now, that to arrive at that few, you have to have a larger pool, which means, and this larger pool, A, can be intentional, which is you go out and you do this on a daily basis. So let me give you a sense of what I've been doing. Um, a couple of weeks ago, I was on a panel for this fellowship called the Acumen Fellowship, right? And there were about 40 other panelists that were running different panels and interviewing different people. And in the end, all of our email addresses were shared with each other, right? I don't know who else did it, but I wrote to each one of those panelists. And all I wrote was that, hey, we were on a panel together. It was, I'm sure you must have had a great experience. If you'd like to catch up, please let me know. I have no agenda, which means to none of these people I wanted to ask for money. I didn't want to tell them about the work that I was doing. I wanted to know them. You know what my conversations with them have been like? Just before this workshop, I was speaking to someone who's lived in Calcutta, which is my city. His family runs a restaurant there. This guy has been a coach and a mentor for many years. Runs a baking company right now. And there's like dozens of things he's told me that seem so exciting, right? And I've told him about my life. And 5 other times that I'm going to speak to him, I'm not going to ask him about money or connections or contacts. All I'm going to do is just chat with him, get to know him, get him to know me, right? And the sixth time, if I write an email to him, do you think he won't give me money? It is most likely that when you ask for money, you'll be told no. And it is most likely that when you ask for advice or when you just want to get to know someone, more often than not, you'll end up getting money. Agenda-less conversations are the best conversations to have. I know we don't have the luxury of time, which is why if you want to raise funds for 2025, you should be starting to work on it right now. The best friendships and the best networking that is done is when you don't need anything from the other person. sure, you'll get relationships and contacts that are completely transactional, which means that Jan, Feb, March, which is in business parlance, which a lot of people call JFMQ, which is the Jan, Feb, March quarter, is the best time to ask for urgent funding, so to say. And by urgent funding, I mean, let's say there is a company that has a corpus of 1 crore and has only managed to spend 80 lakh rupees so far, will be in a hurry to give 20 lakh rupees and will not want to know you, doesn't care who you are, right? And will probably give you money this year and will forget you next year. Maybe it's a good time to build those relationships and figure out, hey, listen, we do education, you do education. If you've not spent all your money, we can, we fit into the geographic criteria, we fit into the policy criteria, we do the exact same work that you've been funding in the past, give us some money. And you might get some of those, right? But these are funders that are not intentional funders. These are not funders who are aligned to your cause, to your mission, to what you want to do. And these are funders that are okay as, let's say, 5% of your overall funding pool. But if you want to grow, you want funders who completely understand you, right? Who really feel connected to you in some way or the other, right? And for that, you have to think about, reaching out to as many people as you can, and then the pool will figure itself out. I have never come across a situation where, I've started fundraising for someone and I've started making relationships, and at the end of 1 year or 2 years, that pool isn't presenting itself, right? There is some intent around it. The intent is to get to know, get to connect, get to meet people, right? And you're strategically choosing people also who you want to talk to. You're not talking to everyone, right? You're talking to people who have connections, who have contacts, but you're ensuring that the relationships that you're building with them is on the foundation of trust, is on the foundation of mutual assistance, of mutual good, um, and they're getting something out of it, right? Whether it's the satisfaction of knowing you, whether it's the satisfaction of knowing what the work is, or just being associated with a cause that they've been feeling strongly about. Any one of those things may happen if you intentionally start reaching out. And that's the formula that I apply. So 10, 25, 5 to 10% are people who will incidentally give you money or will have compliance-based results. And the rest, 70 to 80% are people who will give you money because they really have over time come to believe in you. Within this also, I would say that given that we are in the age of social media, given that we are in the age where public perception really matters quite a bit, um, it's very, very critical um, to constantly engage the audience that you have in the online world, right? So and many people find this very, very hard. So what happens is one-on-one interactions can be personalized, and you can reach people where they are, in the way they want to be spoken to, in the platform that they want to be spoken to. But when you start institutionalizing it, this process of communication breaks down. So if you are making a Facebook post, you know the audience that you're targeting. But if your organization's page is creating a Facebook post, or your organization is doing an Instagram post, how do you still keep it personal? How do you still engage that audience? And how do you really heighten that engagement over a period of time? Just can be game changing, right? One of the accounts that I follow on Instagram is this People's Archives of Rural India, right? Now, People's Archives of Rural, I know this organization for the last 2 years. I've helped them in fundraising as well. When I met them in 2018, sometime around 2018, they had, I think, 3,000 followers on social media, right? And once some funding came in and they had a social media manager, they started putting out their stories as photographs, as text on Instagram, so that people could actually read the stories without going to the web page. People could engage with the story, as an Instagram story or as a photo or something of that sort. And over a period of time, from 3,000 followers, I think last I saw them, they were at 25, 28,000. They may have increased. It's been a long time since I, uh, you know, saw the Instagram post, but they really focused on what their audience wanted to see. And they institutionalized that communication from one-on-one communication to actually the page engaging with the audience. I mean, similarly, very recently, there was this crowdfunding campaign that was run by Slam Out Loud. Slam Out Loud is an organization that does theater and storytelling for children in government schools, right? And um, you know, they reached out to everyone in their network and they were writing emails on a daily basis. And some of the emails were so action oriented, right? They were putting updates on who was performing for them, who had matched donations for them, and what you could do as a supporter, even if you weren't giving money. You know, what hashtag to put out, what message to write. All of that was made so easy that as a supporter, I didn't have to think. And when you institutionalize communication, that's the first thing you have to do. Make it so easy for your audience to engage or to do what you want them to do that they don't have to think. Make thinking the least bit of your engagement with someone else. Do all the thinking for them. Make it really, really, really easy for people to engage. And that just changes the game, you know, it transforms the engagement. And, you know, what it does is it also ensures that your individual audience that is connected to you on these platforms is listening to you. You're not just one more page. You're an integral part of their daily sort of, you know, engagement. And after you've substantively done it, you'll realize that the moment you put in an appeal, the moment you put in a message on social media, you'll get immediate responses. And it can take you to a certain point. This also plateaus after a while, but at least it ensures that 10 to 15% of the fundraising is coming from individual donors consistently over a period of time. So this is my overall broad strokes input on your question. I'm sure it hasn't answered the specifics, but it's very broad strokes, and I hope it helps you think.
Beautiful thought, Rishabh. Before moving on to next question, I want to steal a minute about I'm just sending across the feedback link. Please give your feedback about this session. All the kind words, all the good words coming on the chat, please put them on this feedback survey too, so that we could improve our feedback webinars further, and also the speaker knows about your thoughts. So, Smati ma'am, please go ahead.
Hi, Rishabh. Thanks a ton. That was a great session. My question is, you had mentioned about, when you gave first, that put in the trust for a lot of people to donate. Now, I'm asking this from a foundation's viewpoint. So in our case, it's my family over the years have given the bulk of our funding. But how do I say that without showing off, and where all do we say it? However well I communicate it, I'm always worrying that we are showing off.
Can you repeat that question again?
Yeah.
Your family has been giving?
Has been giving for our foundation for the donations. The biggest funder has been our family so far. I would like to say that because that would make people feel that they're putting in their money where we believe ourselves, the founders themselves believe in it. Where all do we put in such a communication, and how do we put it in as factually without sounding like we are showing off?
I read on Facebook, one of my friends had written that there is no limit to misunderstanding.
Right.
You can misunderstand as much as you want. Which means that if someone wants to look at you as a show off, they will look at you as a show off.
Yeah.
And that's, you can't do anything about it. Having said that, there is an interesting page, or there's an interesting initiative called Living My Promise.
Yes.
where people have committed 50% of their wealth, and these are middle class Indians
Yeah.
who are not necessarily very rich people, but reasonably rich, who've committed to give out 50% of their wealth. Now they make these announcements very publicly, and they share as to why they feel that they should be giving 50% of their wealth. Now again, someone could feel like they're showing off, right? As to why do you need to tell the world? And in India, in Hindi, there is this thing they say, no, कि एक हाथ को पता नहीं चलना चाहिए कि दूसरे हाथ में क्या दिया है, right? Or this गुप्त दान wala, this whole feeling, no, is still there. It's a large section of the older generation still feels that way, but social media has changed that. You need to share. See, vulnerability is such a thing that it functions also as a very strong leadership quality. Um, if you are vulnerable and if you are open, you are providing the leadership for others to come out and open themselves up. And there's this Hollywood movie called Moneyball, and in that movie, the the protagonist is told that the first one through the wall is the bloodiest. So sure, you might end up getting brickbats if you're vulnerable. You might end up getting brickbats if you're really open and honest about what you feel. But you are also opening the way. You're expanding the space for others to open up. And the more others open up, the more people know. And at the end of the day, does it really matter what someone else thinks?
Point. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I cannot emphasize on this enough. Not everyone needs to be your donor. Not everyone needs to be convinced. I'll give an example that I've given several times. Greenpeace and Amnesty are somewhat cult causes. And when I say cult, I mean people. Those who give to Amnesty or those who give to Greenpeace are people who really, really believe in the work that they do. Right? They're like die-hard followers. Greenpeace, when it started in India, was one of the first organizations to do door-to-door fundraising or face-to-face fundraising. Greenpeace hasn't been functional in terms of campaign, etc., for a while now because of the government sort of attacks and all of that. And yet, last I heard, they had about 45,000 active donors who give them money on a monthly basis. And again, last I heard, they were raising about 2 crores a month from those 45,000 donors.
Okay.
For an organization that's not doing any active campaigning, they're getting money simply out of the legacy and the belief in their work because they invested in getting those 45,000 donors. We are a country of 100 crore people, 130 crore people. All they needed was that 45,000 people. I'm sure it took decades to get to that 45,000, and I'm sure there's a lot of attrition in that number that needs to be replenished, and they continuously need to search for new people. But in a country of 130 crore people, can we not find each one of us? Can we not find 1,000 donors for ourselves? We can, and if you're someone looking at corporate donations, if you're someone who's looking at chunks of money rather than smaller sort of sums of money, then even finding 5 or 10 companies which will really believe in you, that's all that you need.
Yeah, I think that is a great answer. Yeah.
And in the end, you will face more rejections than you will face acceptances, and that is just the nature of this beast. It is not a commentary on you. It is not a commentary on your work. It is not a commentary on your proposal. It is not personal. So when you get rejected, it is incumbent on us to remember that it is not personal, and we can still keep an active relationship with those who have rejected us and might actually convert them in the future. But even if we don't, it's not about us. It's just that it didn't work out, and that's the end of it.
That was just great. And in fact, I remember long back when I wanted to give an anonymous donation to my own school, one of the committee members said, please don't do that, because uh, if you put up your name, you'll inspire a lot more people to give. So it just relates to that as well. Thanks a ton. That was wonderful answer that I just needed.
Yeah, sure. Shubhashri, please go ahead.
Hi, Rishabh. This is Meryl from Ekam Foundation. So, our foundation works for mother and child health, and we are, currently in Chennai as such. So, it was a wonderful session. The talk that you have given us. I have two questions for you, Rishabh. So, the first one is, I want to know the credibility of how our funds are being raised, like say suppose we are raising some funds, and we put it across all these social media posts, and ask our friends to promote our fundraising and help us to donate. So our friends, and they share it across their friends, and such word of mouth when it goes, as a donor or as a person who wants to donate, how will I ever trust that my money is in safe hands, or like if it is actually going for a reason, or will I be tricked into saying like I need this money, and that's how my money goes? Like, how as a donor I gain their trust from an organization as such, or it's a personal view, how I gain the other people's trust, like they are actually providing for a cause? That's my first question. And the second question is that so we will have a donor network whom we will be sending them across when we want to raise funds. Like, how do we spread our donor network, like as such, because these people keep helping us time to time, and you can't just keep on going and asking them, can you let's give us money for our fundraising? At one point of time they'll get irritated and they'll say, okay, I don't have money with me that I have to give it to you. So how do we approach other networks and get the money that is needed for our fundraising?
Thank you for your questions. So how does one develop credibility? So I'm going to share a link on chat.
Okay.
All of you can go. It's called the Trust Game. It's a longish game. If you have half an hour, play it. It'll give you an idea of what trust looks like. But then let me give you a crux, a summary of it. During World War II, the Allied and the Axis forces were fighting in Germany, and there was this place called No Man's Land. I don't know if any of you have seen the recent movie Wonder Woman, the first part, where Wonder Woman actually goes into no man's land and beats the crap out of German soldiers. But this no man's land was one of those places where no one could enter, and there was consistent firing. And yet, during Christmas, both sides, which were highly opposed to each other, decided to put down their guns for a small while, get together and celebrate Christmas. It was at the height of the World War. Um, so some researchers asked this question as to how do you develop trust, right? How do you build that understanding that you can really trust me. Now some things came out of that research, and and they are very commonplace findings. They aren't very complex findings. One thing that I've repeated throughout this call is that trust is a factor of multiple repeat interactions. The knowledge that you will meet me a second time, or a third time, or a fourth time automatically results in trust. That you're not going to disappear after the first time, which means that if there is a message that you're sending, even on social media, if you send that message once and never again, it's not going to get a response. Similarly, if you do a online crowdfunding campaign only once in 1 year, and every year you don't follow it up with an annual campaign or an annual fundraiser, you are just a drop in the sea. Everything is a function of consistency. How consistent are you in the way you're saying things? How consistent are you in the way you're presenting yourself? How consistently are you appearing in front of someone else? That's an important factor, right? Miscommunication can be forgiven once, can be forgiven even twice. But if miscommunication becomes your modus operandi, then trust breaks down, right? Often what happens is that, we sometimes forget to turn up for a meeting, or we send a report late, or, we don't give, let's say, the right kind of report or right kind of information at the first go. For whatever reasons, it happens in nonprofits quite a bit, because you're stretched, there aren't too many people, one person's doing 5 jobs, many things are there, right? And once it can be forgiven, maybe even twice on some occasions. But if you keep miscommunicating, trust breaks down. And if trust breaks down, credibility goes down, right? Um, and like you said, if you are not sharing what you're doing, people won't know how you're using the money. Many people think that if you give a detailed breakup of what you're doing, it'll be good. Sure, that's one way of giving reports and all of that. But I've seen that even if you generally keep people updated, and if you personalize what people want to hear, right? Which means that if each person wants a certain kind of report, or a certain set of information, if you can personalize it, if you can categorize or tag your donors or supporters in a certain way, and if you use a CRM, it's very easy to do this, right? If you start tagging your donors into different categories, let's say, let me say that there are two types of donors, right? One are kindred spirits, and the others are mission controllers, right? So kindred spirits are people who want to hear stories of the heart, who want to hear how a child surpassed all odds and did something great in their life. Whereas a mission controller is someone who wants to hear the exact breakup of every penny that you've spent, right? And these are the two kinds of donors you have. Now imagine if you sent a mission controller the kind of report a kindred spirit would like, and if you sent a kindred spirit the kind of report a mission controller would like, what would happen? They wouldn't connect with your cause. You wouldn't know, they wouldn't know what to do with this report. They wouldn't understand what you're saying, right? So if you classify your reports in the way that your donor understands it, and in that sense, you also tag your donors in a certain way, right? Bucket them in some ways. And each organization has their own kinds of donors, right? You'll know what to send them. Even if you use a simple Excel sheet, right, you can do all of this. It's not very complex, right? But you have to keep information, you have to create institutional memory to know how to engage with different donors, and you have to keep track of this. Unless you codify it, unless you put it in some way where someone else who's coming after you understands it, it'll never go anywhere, right? It'll always be starting from ground zero, which is what happens in many cases. I don't think many NGOs actually classify or bucket their donors, create customized reports, keep in touch, avoid miscommunication. These are things that not many NGOs actually focus on. But if you do, you'll realize that retention becomes really, really good. Uh, the other question that you asked was, I forgot what the other question was. Can you repeat it?
Yes. So the other question was like, how do we, expand our donor network? Like, we'll all, as an, organization, we have a list of donor, whom we'll be like keeping in touch on a regular basis. Like if you need to raise some funds, we'll shoot out some posters or, an appeal to them and ask them for fundraising. But other than, at one point of time, because of this COVID and stuff, people are, a little short of money. So how do we stretch ourselves to the other donor networks? Like how do you approach others other than the existing donors?
So I want to ask you, in the last 1 year, how many places have you gone and spoken at? How many active speaking opportunities have you sought for yourself? And how many places have you shared your experiences during the pandemic?
To be honest, I'm actually new to the organization and to this fundraising event as such. So it is just like, I'm just learning through people's things. And what I've seen is what I was asking you, like how to expand myself as a
No, so
person.
that's
Yeah.
so my question is exactly that. Can you give me a count of the number of places where you've spoken, the number of places where you've posted your experiences during the last 1 year, the kind of responses you've got and how you've engaged with them. Can you?
So we have a certain organization, where we have been shooting out certain appeals to them,
No, no,
and
no,
then we have.
no, no, no.
No,
Tell
I've not
me.
had a one-to-one interaction as such.
So let's say I'm speaking on this webinar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Dhaval and Namita reached out and they said speak on this, right? Um, this is one of the places I'm speaking in, right? In the last 1 year, I would have done at least 30 webinars where I've spoken. And even when no one was writing about me, even when the Logical Indian wrote a post about me, when no one was writing about me, I was writing about myself on Facebook. So everything that I was doing was on public display. And I was actively telling people, I want to speak about this, I want to share this. And ultimately it's resulted in enough of a snowball effect that I am getting invitations to speak. The point that I'm trying to make is that often um, networks don't expand by themselves. You have to put yourself out there, and putting yourself out there means that, let's say you're an introverted person, let's say you're someone who doesn't like to speak, you have to cultivate that ability within yourself. I'm not saying you should turn into an extroverted person. I'm not saying you should put your whole world out there. That's not what I'm asking at all. But it's an ability that one has to build over a period of time to seek opportunities to share and use your public platforms. In today's world, everyone is a journalist, everyone is everyone has access to an audience, everyone can say what they want, and everyone has experiences. Use your abilities to type, to write, to English. You have Facebook, you have LinkedIn, you have Instagram, you have Twitter. Use your abilities to put your words out there, and you'll realize that a network is creating itself, it is building itself. It's funny that Dhawal and I spoke almost 2 years ago for about 15 minutes, right? He knows nothing about me, I know nothing about him. And it took 3 years and putting myself out there that, Dhawal noticed me and he said, hey, we've got to have this guy speaking at us, right? And that's the kind of impact or recall that one can have if you are constantly out there. In this world where we are not physically meeting people, in this world when we are not getting into group gatherings, the only way we can network is by putting out information, putting ourselves out there, and not appeals. Again, appeals have only so much impact because people will give, right? Sure, they'll give out of the goodness of their hearts. They'll give because you've asked for something, because the sentiment of giving is high. All of that is great. But people will give when they feel they know you, or they hear you, or they see you, right? And people will know you, see you, or hear you only when you've sort of constantly put yourself out there. Word will spread. If your organization's done great work, how many places have you written about it? If you've done great work, how many places have you spoken about it? It's very, very important to consistently cultivate this. You can do this as a habit also. So let's say you keep a target that I will have one Zoom meeting of half an hour to 45 minutes with one person that I don't know every week. And even if you keep that as a target, it will become your muscle. And before you know it, it's something that you will do automatically. And that's how your network is going to expand. It has to be a conscious choice. I am very extroverted. On an MBTI scale, I am 100% extroverted, which means I am a walking, talking advertising board. In this webinar, I've spoken about Slam Out Loud. I've spoken about the Logical Indian. I've spoken about how I put myself out there. I've spoken about the corporate foundation that gave me 20 lakh rupees. I've done so much talking about so many things that different people would have registered different things, right? And everyone will go back with something, right? And you have to be this advertising board if you want to be in the nonprofit space. No, nonprofit space isn't, it isn't like, some things are aspirational, right? Someone wants to be a member of the Tollygunj club, someone wants to be a member of the Bangalore club because there is an aspiration towards it. People want to be members of ISKCON, they have an aspiration towards it. Nonprofit work isn't aspirational, not yet in India. And the only way you can get people to be inspired or aspire to be with you is by being out there, by putting yourself out there. Only then will people be pulled towards you. And to generate that pull, you have to constantly push. The day you stop pushing, that pull will disappear.
Sure. Beautiful, Rishabh. Disha,
Thank you
please
so much.
go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Rishabh. Great to hear about your experiences, everything. And I work with CMS, Catalyst Management Services, might be aware in Bangalore. And we are a collaborative platform. And I'm sure you would be aware of our background work as well, the platform and all. My question to you is, as you said that talk about your work, speak it, and as you, I'm also a walking, talking advertisement, so all there on social media, etc. As well as we have our Marcom team, we put out posts, blogs, everything is there. Excellent stuff we are doing. As I lead the fund mobilization in CMS, there is just one thing that I need to ask. Our set of donors as well, and how are we reaching as well. Being a collaborative platform, we collaborate with NGOs. Over 300 NGOs we have, and as a part of the service, we assist them in raising funds through a strategic approach. Now, when I am reaching out to corporates as a platform of CMS, what should be my approach in reaching there to the funders?
Could you unpack what you mean by approach?
Um Reaching and talking that this is where I'm needing the funds. This is where I'm wanting to support my partnering NGOs. What should be, because as you said, talk about yourself, it's happening, everything is in place, but still there is a gap. If you're aware, we are working on COVID action collab called as CAC, right? So under that, we are collaborating with a lot of NGOs, helping them in lot many things to raise the funds. There is still some gap, and I feel that approach, that strategy is not appropriate what I am doing. So I just want to understand from you that as a collaborative platform, see, NGO separate, corporate separate is a different strategy. This is a collaborative platform. Do you have any inputs there? It will be really helpful to know from you that what should be the appropriate approach.
So I was part of this migrant resilience collaborative, for which I raised $2 million, which is based out of Central India. Um, mm, so I think certain causes lend themselves for collaboration, and other causes are difficult to fathom as a collaborative, right? So I think one essential piece is have you streamlined communication across the collab? I'll give you an example. Before being an independent consultant, I used to work as this fundraising head of Rainbow Homes. Rainbow Homes is largely structured as a network of homes, shelter care homes across India. It is India's largest shelter care program, and which means there are dozens of NGOs that come together to run each of the homes. Each NGO is zealous in itself, which means that each founder is aspirational about the home that they run or the set of homes that they run, and they work under the larger umbrella of Rainbow Homes. So one of the things we decided was, because each state, each person has their own zeal, we will divide fundraising, into states rather than doing it as one national team. And we will make each state independent, which means that if someone's raising funds in Delhi, then they will raise funds only from Delhi, right? If someone's raising funds from Bangalore, they'll raise funds from within Bangalore. Bangalore people don't approach Delhi, Delhi people don't approach Bangalore, but Delhi finds someone who is willing to fund Bangalore, they'll transfer donors there, right? And it somehow worked there, and we were able to create some independence on that end. But because streamlining language there was such a big problem, we realized that this disaggregated approach works best there, right? But when you create a collaborative and you say we want funding for the collaborative, then the collaborative has to have enough incentives for a corporate to give, right? Which means that, um, you know, most corporates are looking for 3 or 4 things, right? Does it meet my CSR policy? Is it giving me enough visibility and acknowledgement? Will my employees have enough space to volunteer, and let's say, engage with this? Can I do like a team activity there, etc.? And will they fulfill my compliance needs? Will they give me an ATG? Do they have a 3-year track record and all of that, right? Most corporates that I know don't think beyond that, right? So unless it's something that can be touch and feel, I don't know if they think really in the terms of, let's say, is this collaborative going to transformatively change, the COVID situation in India? I don't know of. I can tell you that 9.9 out of 10 corporates are not that far-sighted, and it's just like, the evolution of CSR is just happening right now. So they'll look at, the tick check boxes, and if you go to a CSR, are you checking those boxes, right? That's very important. I did see that the COVID Action Collab, for example, put out a report on how sewage can be used to detect COVID prevalence, in localities. Now when I think about this, my first question is that, did the COVID Action Collab go to, let's say, I don't know, a Bharat Biotech or a Biocon or some of these, very few R&D companies, and say that, listen, we've done some of this thinking. Can you help us expand this a little bit? Because it matches your, let's say, bent of mind, a scientific bent of mind, right? The other way to do this also is to profile HNIs and not CSRs, right? So what happens is that CSR has now become a channel more than a source. And I'm going to differentiate this. The originating money is either from the promoter or the company, right? And a company may choose the CSR path to it, right? Or the promoter might choose the CSR path to it, or might give money on their own, right? So even if you look at the Hurun rich list this time, they've included the CSR giving as part of the rich list, right? So it's no longer a source, it's a channel. So instead of looking at, can I get money from CSRs, you should try figuring out whether the gatekeepers or whether the promoters understand what you're doing. And then let them decide whether they want to give money through CSR, through their own personal trust, or through their, bank accounts directly, and leave it at that, right? I generally feel, and this is my opinion, I don't feel like, so far CSR managers or CSR heads have been empowered enough to take critical decisions. And unless you figure out and the gatekeeper is hardly ever the CSR or sustainability head. The gatekeeper is elsewhere. And if you can figure out what they are thinking and what they are aligned with, it will have an impact. I'll give you an example, right? There's a museum for art and photography that's coming up in Bangalore, right? And one of their funders is Wipro, right? Now Wipro doesn't have arts as something that it funds, not actively at least, right? And the Museum for Art and Photography is a museum for arts, right? So when MAP, MAP, Museum for Arts and Photography, went to Wipro, they said, we will make this an inclusive museum, and we will ensure that disadvantaged children will have access to, photography and some photography courses. It might just be tokenism in some sense, but it's still something that they made part of their offering, right? And they got money from Wipro, and Wipro actually amended their articles to say we'll fund arts as well. Now, there are 2 or 3 things that I sense here. I don't know this, but this is my sensing. The promoter, of MAP is this guy called Abhishek Poddar, who's a reasonably well-known guy in Bangalore. And pretty much every rich family in Bangalore has given money to MAP. So at some level, he's hit a snowball effect where, where everyone's giving. So therefore, there's pressure on peer-based families to give, right? And secondly, he sweetened the deal, the fundraising people have sweetened the deal by saying that we'll bridge this, we'll make this friendly to your criteria so that it's not too difficult for you to give as well, right? And now, see, these are stories that one hears because I'm in this, right? The point is, can you sweeten the deal, and can you create enough of a snowball effect or a bandwagon effect for people to jump on it? Ashoka University is probably the best example of this, right? It started with 2 or 3 people thinking about a liberal arts university in India and how it's important. And these are all Ivy League investors sitting in Delhi thinking about it. 3 people decided to do it, the fourth, fifth, sixth, and after a point, it became a thing that every rich person in India had to invest in. Pretty much anyone who has wealth in India, who comes from this VCPE background, has put in money in Ashoka University, right? And that's because it hit a certain critical mass of a certain kind of wealthy person investing in it, right? So can you create that narrative around the collab? And so I'm asking you to do a mental shift as well, right? I'm asking you to not look at this as a project that you can take to a CSR, but as something that can be of interest to a group of people that can then hit critical mass. And you have to bridge it every time. You can't take it as is. You have to, for someone, let's say someone wants to fund a collaborative, someone else wants to fund scientific research, and a third person wants to just do something about COVID relief or whatever, right? Can you shape the narrative depending on who wants to do what, without focusing too much on the channel, but focusing on the people who are taking decisions?
Beautiful. Any other questions?
Yeah, Rishabh. So
Yeah.
that,
I can barely hear you, Dhaval. Your voice is a bit.
second. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, this is better.
Better.
Hello, is this better?
Yes, yes, Dhaval.
Okay. Rishabh, so 2 questions from my end. One is, you partially addressed this saying that fundraising, in fundraising, you will not hear yeses always. You'll probably hear more no's and less yeses. So at a personal, and most organizations find it a huge problem to get fundraisers. Most people, both in the nonprofit space, especially, but also in the for-profit, don't want to be in sales, so as to speak, uh, and definitely don't want to become and don't want to be fundraisers. So, what led you down this path of trying to raise funds for NGOs? That's my first question. I'll come to the second one after
Yeah.
that.
Stupidity. So I'll tell you the story. It's a fun story. I was in Wipro between 2007 and 2011. I am an ISO 27001 lead auditor by qualification, which means I assess information security systems. I used to assess information security systems for a living. I am also an Excel buff. I have crunched the number of Excel sheets I've crunched is slightly mind-boggling even to think about right now. And I used to work with the risk office back then, which means we used to handle risks of about $300 million as part of Wipro BPO. Uh, I was a young chap and I was really ambitious. I wanted to make money, and my boss said, "Beta, tu yahan kya karega? Tu jaake MBA kar." You know. And I prepared for MBA exams. I also come from an extremely poor family. Um, so I finished bachelor's was in itself a big deal for me. That someone was encouraging me to do masters was even more like mind-boggling. But nonetheless, I prepared for masters. I gave exams, and I didn't clear CAT. I cleared ZAT. I cleared a bunch of other, symbiosis and all of those. The most sasta university was TISS, which was for 1.5 lakh rupees. That was the price of the course. Anyone who's gone to a business college would know that that's just peanuts. That's probably your hostel fees for a semester or something like that, right? And it had a course called MSc in disaster management, and here I was doing risk management. So my banya mind told me ki to disaster management, if you do, you can come back and get a better position in the corporate sector. And my at that time my boss in Wipro was also very sympathetic to me, and he said, you come back with a master's degree irrespective. I will take you in as a manager or an assistant manager or something of that sort. So I went in, I did this social sciences degree. It blew my mind in the sense I couldn't understand what they were saying. I was this hardcore business fellow working with the CRO of Wipro, making PPTs for CXOs, suddenly thrown into their garbage dump, trying to make sense of poverty. It made sense to me because I'd seen poverty myself, but I didn't want to understand poverty. I'd seen enough of it. I wanted to make money. But as it so happened, when you see other people's struggles, you forget your own, and your problems seem much lesser in life. So I decided that I wanted to try something in the non-profit sector and not go back to the corporate space. So I joined this organization in Ahmedabad, which worked in villages and tribal areas of Gujarat. And for 1 year, I was traveling in jungles and deserts and, meeting people and, talking to people in Gujarati. I learned Gujarati. I learned a little bit of a dialect also there called Miani. And I was working with women. I got really tired of living in those rural areas. My skin had burnt. And, I was like, I want to go back to an urban job. And, I gave this interview to Rainbow Homes. And I can tell you, this is no longer a guess. They hired me because precisely they thought I couldn't do anything. They were so tired. They had fired 2 sets of fundraisers in 2 years that they were sure that no matter who they hired, they wouldn't be able to do the job, right? And it had become somewhat of a donor. They had donors who were paying them to hire fundraisers, and they couldn't find fundraisers. So they hired me. I had no experience in fundraising, zero. I knew how to speak to a CXO. I knew how to speak to a senior person. I know what they want to hear. A CXO in a corporate company has 5 minutes in which they want you to explain the world to you. Like you have no time. You have to explain everything to them without them having to think anything, and they will take their decision in those 5-10 minutes. That was my life for 4 years. So I used that experience in Rainbow Homes to try and crack a few deals. And the first deal that I cracked was Wipro. How did I crack it? A VP in Wipro knew me. He recommended me to Wipro Cares. The local Wipro team in Calcutta knew me as the young kid who was really ambitious, who had worked with them for 4 years. So I had local goodwill. We had a home in Calcutta. I took them. There was great feedback from the local team. There was a push from a VP to Wipro Cares that saying that, listen, this is a great project. And the Wipro Cares team in themselves liked the project as well. And that's how I got my first deal. Now, many things came together. I had access, I had language, I had experience, and I knew the people. There was familiarity, there was experience, there was access, there was language, right? All of these three things. And fortunately, in that case, I had the network, right? I could pull multiple sides of that organization into through my goodwill or through my being there, right? And that was the only fundraising Rainbow Homes had ever done in 3 years. That was a 1.5 crore deal that came in through a rookie fundraiser in under 4 months. An average sales cycle is not less than 6 to 8 months. It just changed the organization. For an organization that was defeated, did not think that it could do fundraising, was suddenly up and pumped that a MNC had given them money for 3 years for 50 lakhs a year, which was the largest at that time. Wipro Cares ka, that was the largest grant, right? And the kind of confidence that came in, the organization in itself became a fundraising organization. So culturally, what had never been part of the DNA of the organization became an intrinsic thing that everyone was doing. And I cannot emphasize how important this is. If you have one fundraiser or one founder doing fundraising in an organization, you're in for hell. It is such a cultural thing, right? And I'm mindful of saying that fundraising isn't the only thing that you should be doing in an organization, but it certainly is something that you should be devoting at least 1 to 2 hours every day as an organization and not just as one person.
Awesome.
The power of network is within an organization. People make networks, and the more people who go out and create networks, the larger your network will be. And your systems are going to hold your network, your CRM, your emailing list, your donor list is going to come out from this. The more you document it, the more you codify it, the stronger it is over a period of time. So yes, Dhawal, that was the craziness that happened.
I think we have to congratulate your recruiter at Rainbow Homes, who given us who made all this fundraising happen. Hey, my second question: what would you say are the top 3 mistakes that NGOs do while fundraising? If you have to just kind of, I'm just trying to distill this entire session out and say, what would you say are the top 3 mistakes that NGOs make in fundraising?
Ask for money when they most need it. That is mistake number one. If you are running short of your target, and if you're asking for money when you're absolutely down and out, is the worst way to raise money. I mean, imagine, yeah, if I came up to you and I said, hey, give me money. You don't know me, I don't know you. The first time I met you, I've just asked you for money. Is this ridiculous? Um, the second thing that I feel is many people rely on the goodness or the effectiveness of their work to get money. It can get you money. It has gotten money for many organizations for over many years, but that was a different era. And that was the time when Ford Foundation used to make grants for 10 years. This era is entirely different. There are once in a lifetime opportunities in your own sort of bubble, and you're not talking about it, which most NGOs don't. Um, People are not going to come searching for you. You have to go out and search people, which means active prospecting, active search has to be a great part of what you're doing, right? The third mistake that I feel is, uh, people forget donors once money comes in, or people forget connections once money comes in. I've worked with several people who are really high profile in the nonprofit space, who are legends for their work, for their courage. And sometimes they come across as the worst human beings because once the money comes in, they've forgotten me, they've forgotten the donor, and I only hear of them when they're in dire straits 3 years later. You've not closed the loop, you've not sent in your reporting, you've not kept in touch, you've not asked. I mean, how many of us here wrote to our donors and well-wishers asking, how are you doing? How is the lockdown affecting you? Are you all right? I bet if we did a show of hands, it will be less than 1% of this janta. We don't value relationships. And donors somehow donors somehow often feel that they're just ATM machines.
Right, right.
And I feel if most people took care of these three things, a lot would be solved.
And that kind of comes back to the question that we had earlier, which is actually 80% of the questions people ask is, how do I get new donors? But very few tend to ask, saying, how do I get more from my existing donors, or how do I engage my existing donors? So I think before you go to
want to
new
make one
donors, I think
data
you have to
point,
get to
Dhaval.
existing
I
donors.
want to make one data point, right?
Yeah.
How I assume all of you know Starbucks. Starbucks is a very popular coffee chain across the world. One of the reasons it's very popular is because it's consistent across. A cup of coffee in Starbucks in the US is going to taste the same as a cup of coffee in India. And customer service is going to be the same across, right? Um, they're very, very standardized, right? You know how much Starbucks spends on customer acquisition? One customer acquisition in Starbucks is $1,000. Which means even before you've spent a single rupee in Starbucks, they have already invested 75,000 rupees in you. The lifetime value, and by lifetime value, I mean the overall time that a customer recurringly comes to a Starbucks store is the highest. Average lifetime value of a Starbucks customer is anywhere between 24 to 36 months. I mean, imagine the amount of money that, every time you go to a Starbucks, you're spending nothing less than $800. Multiply that by that time. So really, I mean, think about this. This is just a phenomenal data point. I'm blown by this. Forget networks, yeah. Mine who we have. Really mine them. Really profile who you know. And really keep at it with them. Your circle will expand on its own. You don't have to do anything.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Rishabh, for your time. Really, I think this has been a great learning experience for all our NGOs today. Very
Yeah.
inspiring.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dhaval, for having me.
Yeah. A beautiful, inspiring story, Rishabh, from your life, from your experience. I'm sure our NGOs would be now motivated, inspired, filled with new ideas. This is our 15th webinar. Earlier webinars recording can be found here. And also, if you are interested with Danamojo platform, I'm just sending in the link to place in the inquiry. Also, we have lined up interesting webinars for this month and April. We look forward to meeting you in our upcoming webinars. And Rishabh, thank you again.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.